Are you looking for high-performance AV distribution that just works? Meet NetVio, a UK-based innovator delivering cutting-edge AV over IP, HD-Base-T, HDMI, USB, and Dante AVA hardware, backed by intuitive, license-free configuration and control tools. The NetVio 360 configurator and license-free NetVio Go user control app makes setup and user control effortless, while the open universal API and pre-built drivers ensure seamless integrations with Control4, Crestron, RTI, QSys, and more. NetVio is exclusively distributed in Australia by Chords Australia. Check them out at netvio.com.au. That's netvio.com.au. Hello and welcome to Master Integrator, the podcast that goes beyond the surface of smart home technology and explores the ideas shaping how we live, work, and feel in our built environments. I'm your host, Paul Skelton. Today we're diving into a topic that doesn't always get the airtime it deserves: wellness. Not as a buzzword or a passing trend, but as a core outcome of what many integrators are already delivering every day. Lighting, shading, climate control, automation, all working together to create homes that don't just function, but actually support human well-being. Joining me is Michael Short, the Vice President of Marketing Operations and Residential at Crestron, who's been at the forefront of helping the industry reposition what it does through the lens of wellness. From circadian lighting and air quality to voice control, soundscapes, and the role of AI in creating adaptive environments. This conversation reframes the idea of integration as something far more personal and powerful. We also talk about the challenge integrators face in quantifying wellness outcomes and why the industry is only just learning how to talk about something it's been doing for years. This is Master Integrator. Here's Michael Short. Welcome to the show. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, so VP of Marketing, Operations and Residential here at Crestron. I've been with Crestron for about 8 years now. I had a little 2-year hiatus in between where I strayed into a lighting organization and then got pulled back into the deep world of AV. Prior to that, I've had various sort of marketing roles in different organizations, started off in an outsourcing and banking world, in the consultancy side of things, moved into a little bit of recruitment through luxury automotive and was doing marketing and business development for that. And then, like I said, came to Crestron, started off in the EMEA team, looking after residential marketing from Europe. That grew into a more global role. And then from there, sort of progressed through managing both the EMEA team as well as global residential marketing, global PR, global social operations and process within our team. So had a really fantastic career so far with Crestron. I had a really, really great time whilst doing it. I fell into the industry. It's not something that, to be honest, I didn't know the industry existed until I got this first role at Crestron. And then since entering, like you'll know, Paul, you've been in the industry for a long time. There are so many areas to work and explore. It's a very people-orientated business, which I love. There's lots of emotion on the residential side. So whether it's working with dealers or customers or other manufacturers, it's a really passionate place. So for me, I've kind of found a great home in this industry and really, really enjoy it. Really enjoy it. And the residential side, it's an amazing, progressive, technology advanced area. And it's a really exciting time for us all in this industry.
It is funny because most people that have been around for even just a little bit of time, we all kind of fell into this space. I mean, I fell into it back in 2006 was when I kind of started again, like you. I had no idea this was a thing. And to kind of then turn it into a career. It's been a very interesting ride, put it that way.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, most people, you say, so many people in the industry, dealers actually, I find a lot of dealers progress through very connected ways into the industry. Maybe they had a background in programming, a background in, technology somewhere. And, then they start their integrator and they sort of grow from there. But those of us maybe on the manufacturing side who weren't so deep into the actual build and delivery and implementation of the technology. There's a lot of people who just kind of stumble in, and then I feel you just get hooked in the crazy world that it is. Part of my role looks after marine as well. So, I get the incredible experiences of working on board some of the world's largest super yachts. And if you'd said that to me 10 years ago, that you'd be doing this technology and being involved not only in just beautiful homes, but beautiful boats, I mean, like, this world doesn't exist, but it does. And yeah, like I said, it's exciting. And there's so much going on right now, so much change, more technologies coming into what we do. AI is obviously going to play a big part in the future. And I feel very fortunate that we're involved in the industry.
So the main thing that we're going to talk about on this episode is around the idea of integrated wellness technologies. So I'm wondering, how did that first kind of cross your radar, and what has your experience been to date in wrapping your head around what is happening in terms of wellness?
Well, it's a funny one because I think probably 3 years ago, there was this shift in conversation around wellness smart home. And what I mean by shift is I think people actually started to talk about it as a topic that could influence end users and could help dealers in this industry talk about what they do in a way that maybe could affect um, people in their home. I think COVID actually triggered a lot of that conversation as people spent more time in their home and as people started to become more aware of things like air quality, for example. And that triggered a moment in the industry where people decided that, okay, we could talk about this topic because we make a difference. The funny thing is, for Crestron and other manufacturers and the dealers, if you think about what we've been doing with wellness, we've actually been doing it for 50 years. Because when you think about automated shades, for example, which has been in the industry 50 years, people have been taking shades up and down. Shades have an effect on humans because when you let light in at the right times of day, when you move and change light naturally through shades in the evening, all of that affects your circadian rhythm, which everyone now knows about because of digital addressable lighting and the ability to do it through unnatural light. But we've been doing that through natural light for years through shading, but nobody was talking about it. It never was a buzzword. It never was a topic. So I think when this all started to happen for the industry, I think we've been doing it for years. We can talk about lighting. I'm sure we will later. We'll talk about shades. We can talk about audio. You can talk about voice control for accessibility. You can talk about how all of these things affect sleep, affect mood, but we didn't talk about it. We just did it. And I think COVID happened, more wearables started to appear. People became a lot more conscious about tracking their own sleep patterns and understanding more about their own body. And I think about 3 years ago, that triggered our industry to say, oh, we're actually doing stuff. We should probably talk about it. I feel like the industry itself, we're not the best at promoting the things that we do. We're very good at going in and solving the problem and delivering a solution and delivering a service and working with this technology in spectacular ways. But when it comes to getting creative with how we sell ourselves, wellness technology has been a difficult one to push. But I think we're getting better at it. I think there's so much more that we can do. And I think if we touch on it later with AI, what we can do there as well is really exciting. But yeah, to answer your question, we've been doing it a long time, but I think we've only just started to talk about it very, very recently.
It's kind of an odd one. And I guess when you say that we have been doing it for a long time, it probably puts into context a few of the issues that I had in trying to do any form of research in the role wellness is playing in technology, because all of the numbers that I look up, it's saying, wellness, it's a $300 billion industry. And I'm thinking, that's massive, but they're including things like art therapy and some elements of yoga. And okay, so that's not really what we're talking about. So, I mean, with wellness being such a vague term, how do you go about measuring its impact on what Crestron's doing, but also on the industry? Is there a way to say that this percentage of the industry is now being driven by wellness, or we're seeing this much growth in people specifically asking for wellness, or is that just too difficult?
It is difficult. I know that there's been surveys done by industry bodies and associations who've been asking questions around wellness. The numbers are not big. Now, I do think that's because many of the things that we sell are not direct wellness products. So you mentioned, let's say, yoga, okay? And that is a wellness activity. If a customer built a yoga studio, does that go down as in the house builders world, that they've built a gym or they've built a yoga studio? And then if Crestron did the audio in that space to support the acoustics, and if Crestron did the lighting in that place to support the movement of the lights through the 1 hour session that they do to make sure someone brings light and shades and audio into it, did Crestron just put lights and shades and audio into a room in the house, or did they provide a wellness service? My view is they've just put lights and shades into the house when it comes onto the statistics. But if we really wanted to dig deeper, we've provided a wellness solution. And I think that's where it's very tricky for us, because to measure and quantify from our standpoint, there aren't particular products that we do that could be said, wow, we have a wellness technology solution that's going into every single home. Now, if you bring in third-party solutions, whether it's an air filtering solution that is looking after your air quality, now that's through a third-party solution that we obviously connect to. We're a collaborative company. Collaboration is part of our ecosystem. But we could probably track the driver downloads to see how many people have connected to that. But it isn't something that we're actively thinking about. And I think that's why it's really hard to quantify what we're doing in an industry. Now, we have a number of hotels that we're doing where we're doing wellness specific topics. We're doing elderly care homes, and some of the solutions we're putting in there are to trigger wellness and improvement in those types of scenarios. But I don't know anybody from the industry side who, if they don't sell a wellness specific product, is tracking how big of that 300 billion we're getting. But again, it depends on those categories that you said. We have a piece of that pie. And I think that, going back to my original conversation, the more important thing here for integrators is to be able to have the conversation with their customer and educate the customer on how all of these elements do more than just produce a beautiful cinema or give easy the control of lighting or music. You need to add that layer of wellness into the conversation, because it will make a difference to how people see the technology.
So before we go down the path of talking about some of those technologies, you said there that you thought there was a shift in the market about 3 years ago. Have you been able to pinpoint what happened about 3 years ago that you think might have actually precipitated the actual shift?
For us, where it came onto our table as a very initial topic of conversation was, like I mentioned, so COVID happened, everybody was at home, and everyone was looking at ways to stay healthy in the home. And a big, big topic at that point was air quality. I don't know whether it was the same in Australia, but in the UK here, the government had like guidelines on opening windows and airflow, and all these things were going on. And at that point, a number of air quality solutions came to market, and these companies were sort of striking while the iron was hot. And it was all about helping to filter air and improve air quality. And for us, we had a number of those brands approach us to connect into the Crestron Home system, so you could visualize your air quality through Crestron Home, and then you could build sequences to support and make you aware of what's happening in the system. So, for example, if air quality went below a certain threshold, It could trigger your HVAC system to support cycling the air to improve the air quality in the house. So that happened, in and around COVID. And then at that point, I also feel like a number of brands came to market in the wearable market that sort of changed it from just running fitness apps to tracking your biometrics. Things like Whoop launched, and people were getting more aware of their own personal data. And I also think that post-COVID, the world had a shift around people's personal health. And I felt like a lot of, and again, this might just be the bubble that I live in or the people that I surround myself with, but I do know that this whole idea about having better understanding of your sleep patterns, your water intake, all of these things, the smart home, the smart wearables market took a bit of an explosion. And I think that just brought and bubbled more topics up to light. I think made us and the industry start to click around, okay, so what are the things that we're doing that can connect to this trend? Because I'm a marketing guy. So when you see trends kicking off in other areas of the industry, in other areas of corporates in the world, we like to jump on them because we want to ride that wave. So whether it was post-COVID health and wellness and mental health, which obviously has been over the last, since COVID, a big topic. So how could we support those trends all the way through to wearables? Like when all this comes to light 3 or 4 years ago as something that the world is thinking about, we in the industry and at Crestron have to start thinking about those topics and seeing if we can do anything good. Can we connect the dots? And I honestly think that was the big trigger for me. I don't think, Paul, 7 years ago, we would be having this conversation.
No, and I do remember going to a CEDIA Expo. It probably would have been about 7 or 8 years ago. And there was one company that was talking about this thing called wellness. And I remember everyone just looking at them like they were a pack of hippies and avoided them. So it's definitely shifted. Now, apparently everyone's a hippie. But if we do talk about some of the technologies then, because let's start with what I would consider to be the obvious ones where we talk about wellness. Obviously, you mentioned indoor air quality there. Human-centric lighting would be one that a lot of people are familiar with as a concept, and even to some extent, maybe water quality. So if we look at the current landscape of what is possible today, what is possible today?
So I think the biggest market by revenue and by trend that we're seeing is definitely circadian lighting. There is enough data and enough analysis done by specialists who, if you go online and you do your research, there is true medical data that says that human beings are affected by light, and circadian lighting is an absolutely imperative part of how human beings wake up in the morning and how they go to sleep. And the biggest thing, and this is one that we could track by revenue because circadian lighting is triggered through full color tuning and tunable white lights being installed in people's home. We know in the industry that tunable white and full color lighting is a massive growth category. And even on the DIY side, as you start on the cheaper aspects of Philips Hue and then move through to people like DMF and Lutron Ketra, Crestron can control all of these platforms. So we're, from a lighting standpoint, we're an open ecosystem and we'll work with all types of addressable lighting. We know that tunable lighting affects how humans behave. So for those maybe who don't fully know what this is, I'm sure 90% of people do. This is all about making sure you have the right color and intensity of light when you wake up in the morning. So it triggers you to wake up. It triggers you to wake up at the right time and it triggers your body to release chemicals that allow you to wake up smoothly. And as you go through the day, you change those light curves and the intensity and the color to go, from oranges to blues. Blues keep you awake. Blues make you feel more energy. So then in the evening, as you bring in more orange hues that trigger melatonin, Melatonin is the drug in your body that helps you wind down and go to sleep. Now, if you sleep better, you feel better. That is an absolute fact that humans need sleep for recovery. So, tunable lighting set to a circadian pattern for your home can really affect how you improve energy, how you sleep, how you feel better. So the industry is doing that. We've been doing it for many, many years, but now we're talking about it. And now we're explaining to customers that matching the natural sunlight outside, so your body feels like that, like you're outside more, is really positive. Now, to go back to the marine analogy, we've been doing this for years in crew cabins. You think about on board these beautiful large super yachts, windows are smaller. Many of the staff might be working in below level quarters. They might be chefs with less windows than on the upper deck. If you can do tunable lighting in those quarters and mimic the light that's outside, it's going to help people on board feel better. Same as on cruise ships. And obviously, this applies in the homes that we live in this room here, as we move into other areas of the house where you spend a lot of time. That lighting is so important. So that is undoubtedly the biggest area of the industry right now. But connected to that is shades. If your shades can come up to let natural light in at the same time as your lights are going up in intensity and moving into the blues, you can manage both natural and unnatural light together to produce an environment that feels like you're outside in the sun, and it tricks your body into feeling exactly as it would be if we lived outside. Because ultimately, we all came from cavemen, we all came from living outside. Our bodies are built to wake up when the sun comes up and to go to sleep when the sun goes down. That is natural in humans. So mimicking that is vital for energy. It's vital for how we live. It's vital for mental health. And that is something that is, I believe, is the foundational element of wellness in the smart home. Everything after lighting just layers on top and can add more and more value.
Yeah, lighting itself, I think it's one of those things that a lot of integrators, from my experience, think they understand very well. But I think there's still a lot of room for them to learn. And obviously, we talk about human-centric lighting, but a lot of researching to the lighting temperature or lighting color as it relates to people with dementia and mental
100%.
health and depression. And there's so much happening. And I think there's a risk of people becoming a little bit complacent around what they know. So I think it's a really fascinating subject to kind of delve into. And you're right, it is a massive area where I think there's a lot of research, but still a lot to go.
I agree. And we all have to also be very careful because we're not medical professionals. And our industry, look, I know from my side that as we've been talking about health and wellness as it relates to Crestron, our legal team is really, really making sure that the things we say have data points, have the medical research behind it that we can link to. But we have to be really careful as an industry because we can't make promises that are not true. We can link to resources that support it. And I think that's where the dealers as well have a tricky story to tell because they can go in and even this conversation we're having, right? We know that lighting affects everything we do as humans, but it's very difficult to turn around and say this when we're not the professionals or we don't have our own research to give. But I think that there are many of these things that we can say we know impact and we know make a difference. When we layer on top, I think you mentioned temperature and climate control. I mean, we all have our preferred temperature that we like to sleep in. I don't know whether you're like me. I go to a hotel and I put that aircon as low as possible. I like to sleep cold.
Mm-hmm.
People like to sleep hot. Now, there's data that tells you that the perfect temperature is X, but we're all independent. And when you think about it, in a smart home, you can just make that temperature happen automatically. My preference is 18 degrees. Great. So tell the home When I go to bed, put my temperature down automatically to 18 degrees and I sleep better. Sleeping better makes me feel better. That is a health and wellness topic. Whereas in the past, we would never have really said it's health and wellness. We would have just said, oh, helps you sleep. Cool.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. Connected Magazine is your go-to publication for the commercial and residential AV and smart home industry. The technology boom is transforming education, but it raises questions too. In this issue, Connected explores the ethical concerns facing manufacturers, installers, and the next generation of technology users. Check out this and more in the latest edition of Connected, plus the website for daily AV news and product updates. Links are in this episode's description. Have you seen any integrators navigate these conversations particularly well? Is there anyone that you've sat there and gone, they know what they're doing here, and I think every integrator should kind of take a leaf out of their book?
Yeah, there's a couple of companies in the US who I've seen have great conversations around this. I'll have to fact check myself, but I know Global Wave are doing a lot of wellness technology in elderly facilities, and they've really jumped on some of the integrations. We produced some nice collateral. We have stuff on our website around this. There are some dealers I know specifically in the US who have been talking about it, but being brutally honest, I still don't think it's a topic that the industry feels comfortable talking about like they do when it comes to audio or video, the topics that we've been doing for so long. I think it's still a difficult conversation. And look, it's a harder sell. And I think that we could do better as an industry. But the problem is, as you mentioned 20 minutes ago, when we don't have this hard statistical data that goes 30% of your business is health and wellness tech, it's very difficult for these businesses to focus on it because there isn't the metrics that say, I'm going to dedicate learning and people to selling in this way. So it's a bit chicken and egg. And I think the more conversations we have, the more education we deliver to our customers as a business, as an industry, the more value maybe we'll get people coming to integrators to talk about, hey, I really need that circadian lighting, or I really want to make my climate control integrated to my personal health, or I want to bring air quality in. I want to have soundscapes in the home so I hear audio of outdoors because audiophilia is a thing and it makes you feel good when you hear the trees and you hear birds, and that's good for health too. So until maybe people are having these conversations with integrators, going to be a slow grind, I think.
See, it's quite interesting. A couple of things that you've said here. So, I don't see myself as completely ignorant when it comes to, health and wellness. I'm not the healthiest person by any means. I'm not going to claim that, but mental health in particular absolutely is a topic that I've delved into many times in the past. But I think you're right in that when you're talking about some of these technologies, it's hard for integrators to talk about it because I think a lot of the technologies they might not even be aware of, as you said, counted as wellness. One of the ones that you mentioned before was audio. I would never even considered audio in terms of wellness. So I'd be interested to know, obviously you mentioned audiophilia there, but what role can this play within integrated wellness technology? As an industry, we understand audio, but we'd put money on that. No integrator listening to this has probably sat there and gone, oh, it's a wellness technology.
So there's multiple aspects of this. So when you think about the sounds of nature, okay, and we actually had this conversation a couple of years ago when we were talking about how could audio potentially affect how people feel in the house. And you can curate soundscapes that make the sound of outside come in, whether it's, birds, wind, all the elements of nature that make humans feel good. Again, it sounds fluffy and it's really difficult. I think this is kind of the problem with this topic is that really, is that something? And I can't remember the exact terminology. I'll have to look it up after with regards to how when humans feel closer to nature, It can trigger mental health. It can trigger really positive feelings and emotions that affect how you can, get through your day. So if you can bring the sounds of nature inside, then that's something that can affect mood. When you think about many people listen to podcasts with calming music to sleep to, or people maybe put classical music on after they've had a really intense meeting, or maybe at home they need to unwind and they put classical music on. All these different types of mood management through audio are wellness techniques, really well-known wellness techniques. There's even, when you think about elements of therapeutic audio, so we think about sound healing, breath work, vibroacoustic sessions, all of these things are about audio. And they're all techniques that can help humans change mood, calm down, change emotions. Integrators can use these techniques and automate these techniques in the home. And we don't think about that. We think about people just playing music, right? Let me just put music on, okay? But ultimately, you could have a quick action in your Crestron home system that says calm. And I could finish this podcast with Paul and be like, that was the most stressful conversation I've had in my life. Paul is a nightmare. Oh my God.
You wouldn't be the first.
I wouldn't be the first. And it's not true, Paul. You'll love it. And I could press my calm, quick action, and I could play some music that really helps me just mellow down and feel better. That is applying audio in a different way to having a party. You could bring audio into wellness routines. I could press my wind down or quick action, and that could bring the lights down. It could bring the shades down, and it could change the music to that calming sense that I want to have in the home. Music and audio affects how humans live. We as integrators, we as manufacturers can affect that, and we can play into that, and we can offer that as a service. But you have to know how to have the right conversations and implement that for the customer. And again, done in the wrong way, it can just sound fluffy, like we're selling and marketing air, right? But there is a lot of really great data behind this, and we do it. We do wellness. We genuinely do it. And it's about having the right conversations.
So one of the other things that you mentioned was voice control. What role would voice control play in wellness?
So if you think about making wellness accessible on one side of things, so being able to trigger and have conversation with the home that could maybe simplify getting into those scenarios. Voice control, I would say when I said 7 years ago, we weren't talking about wellness. 7 years ago, we were talking about voice being the be all and end all of smart home. And the truth is, it's a nice added value. It's an interface. But we're humans. We still want to touch. And if you and I are having dinner, I don't want to shout over you. 1 minute, Paul, let me just talk to the home and pick AC/DC, right? I want to just do it surreptitiously and put the music on and have that. So it's a great interface addition, but voice can help to trigger those scenes. But I think for me, the biggest area where voice is making a wellness impact is for those people that have disabilities, maybe live in a home where touching interfaces are not as accessible. Maybe they're unable to use a phone, they're unable to move around a home and touch walls. Being able to use their voice to control the way that they live makes everything from a wellness perspective far more accessible. To those people, wellness is actually just being able to live and live normally and switch on the lights and switch on the shades and pull them down and play audio. That accessibility aspect of voice is a massive, massive wellness aspect because it's living, it's mental health, it's accessibility, and voice brought that to this audience. So ignoring voice for the things that we think, oh, set my timer, voice control for my music. If you move away from the added usability, fun aspects maybe that we have as an interface in our normal homes and switch that into those that truly need voice to live, that is an incredible, incredible wellness aspect.
So do you see this then from the integrators they're familiar with these systems? So is wellness as a concept an upsell, or should this be something that actually talking about in every single job? Because it seems like what we're talking about, it's almost best practice rather than a specialized area.
Oh, it's a great question because I think this is never a good answer, but I think it's both. I think we need to be able to upsell for sure, because there are elements with this that could add more product and more solution into the house. Let's say you're in a project nice and early and they're not thinking about doing tunable or digitally addressable lighting. It is more expensive. It's more expensive to put full color or tunable white into a house. And it would be very easy to turn around and just say, no, we're going to control standard Dali fixtures. So in that case, it is an upsell. Look, let me talk to you about how tunable white can change the shape of your living, how it can change the way that rooms feel and how you feel. That's an upsell. But at the same time, if you can talk about that early on in the project as a natural conversation, then your projects are naturally going to grow and go and exceed. So I do think it's both. But like I said, it's difficult because the conversation that we're having can sometimes feel fluffy. And I think, like I said, we all need to understand, how do you have these conversations? How do you provide the data points and talk about these in a realistic way that resonate? And then it's about understanding your customer and knowing this person is not going to be interested in, audio for mood management, but I know they're going to be interested in lighting, or I know they're going to be interested in how they can connect climate into better sleep. Knowing your customer and then being able to get into it with a relative level of confidence is really valuable.
Okay, so my question then becomes, if we're starting to talk about these technologies and a lot of them are starting to look at, obviously, people's personal data, their health data, things like that, where does privacy come into it then? And how is wellness technology going to be impacted by people's inherent right to privacy?
Well, we take privacy and data extremely seriously. Crestron, the products we put in the home are the products that we put in the White House, in military facilities all over the world. They're in the biggest corporations. The top corporations in the world have Crestron technology controlling, putting content through the house, collaboration technology on Teams call. We're in the biggest, most secure and best facilities in the world. They're also in your home. So our data and security is, best in class in the industry. Now, where we're talking about people's personal data, because you're kind of leaning here into connecting to, let's say, wearables that are taking your personal data. So the way that Crestron works with those third-party solutions is we have an open API. They connect into the wearable technology. All of the data, let's say, I don't know, but do you have Whoop in Australia? Do you guys have the Whoop band? It's just a simple, it's not simple actually, that's completely unfair on the Whoop brand. It's an incredible piece of technology that you wear on your wrist, like others, like Garmin does this and other brands, where they take all of your health data and it produces it back to you, and it knows your heart rate variation, it knows your stress levels, it does all this data manipulation. All of that data lives with Whoop or lives with Garmin. And me as a consumer ticks the boxes that I allow Whoop to have my personal data, and I sign up to that platform and they keep my data secure or not, depending on the terms and conditions that I've read. So if those brands connect with Crestron, we never take that data. We just take whatever's been given that Whoop's been allowed to share with us into our system. So we would never look to take anyone's personal data from those aspects and bring it into the Crestron ecosystem unless it was part of a wider progression that we were doing with that brand. So everything is Crestron. Same with voice control. We don't listen in to people. There are other brands in our industry who have recently had issues where they've said they're not listening and they're listening. We all know that Amazon is always listening. We know that Siri is always listening. So that's just not something that Crestron does. Now, that's not to say in the future, with the prevalence of AI, that we wouldn't need to develop ways to listen and take that data and keep it secure. Because when we go, we've spoken about what's available now. When we think about what's coming in the future, I do think there's value in us knowing that data and being able to take it into the Crestron system and manipulate it in a way that provides some incredible solutions in the home. I'll give you one quick example. Let's talk about wellness wearables. And the wearable knows my stress levels, measuring my heart rate. The wearable knows my sleep patterns. It knows exactly how much sleep I've had and in what sort of level, whether it was deep sleep, all those elements of sleep. Imagine we could take that data, utilize Crestron AI, and make a decision or offer an option to the homeowner. You've been sleeping poorly recently. We believe that it's because your shades are currently going up 2 minutes before they should, which is waking you up with sunlight tiny bit too early. Would you like us to adjust your shades to help your sleep pattern? Yes. And I tweak the shade slightly. We believe you're getting more stressed between 3 and 5 every day. Would you like us to start playing nature sounds in your office during those periods to help calm you down? It could offer all the solutions you think about that we have, but based it on your personal real-time data delivered by the wearable and give you choices and options to maybe curate your day around your own personal health. Now, to do that, we need the different wearable technologies, I have a smart water bottle. It tells me when I'm not drinking enough during the day. I'm a bit of a geek. And it tells me, you need to drink more right now. It flashes at me. All of these different technologies that we all have connected, if we can take that data into Crestron AI, we could do some really crazy, innovative smart home things naturally and position them back to you as a customer to say, do you want to do this? We think we can help with this. We know that would you like me to make that change? Or you could tick the box that says, just do everything that you think is going to make me feel better. We could deliver that. But that's where I think you talked about data. That's where I think in the future, we could get super smart. And that's exciting. That's using AI for a true purpose. When you think about taking that and bringing it into Crestron, hell, that's some cool stuff. That's really exciting.
I imagine there's probably some things that you probably can't go into because obviously, commercial and confidence and all of that. But how close are we to actually seeing something like that?
Closer than we would think. For us at Crestron, AI isn't just a buzzword. So everything we're working on is to develop solutions and tools for integrators and customers to make a real difference in their lives. And we're working on it. Now, is it close? Some of it maybe. Some of it is future thinking, and we're having all these conversations around what's possible. I think AI is developing at a tremendous speed. So I think as these two technologies converge, we'll get closer and closer. but it's not something that I could turn around and say, hey, Paul, in the next 6 months, you're going to see Crestron drop this incredible innovation and integration. It's something that's going to naturally develop as AI gets smarter, as wearables and wellness tech gets smarter. We are converging into our professional smart home world, and we will see them come together beautifully, I think, over the next couple of years and delivering something with true, tangible benefits. That's where the professional smart home, the integration of all these technologies, data security have to converge with brands that can do it all and do it safely and integrate and that are built together. That's where the advantage comes. Then the integrators, these guys are the curators of this masterpiece. They're the guys who are going to go out and really sort of get out to the market and make this magic happen as they always have done and as they develop with us. It's really exciting. It's a great time to be in the industry. And I think that DIY tech, it's cool, right? There's elements of that we want to use. But the pro side of things, we can continue to grow and grow and grow if we have the right conversations and we continue to converge with these certain worlds. It's super exciting.
Is it a fair assumption to say that ultimately Crestron's plan would be to kind of own the entire ecosystem here? Would you see a world where Crestron would be making the wearable devices that collect that data, that then interfaces within the Crestron system and the AI all works together? Or realistically, would you still be relying on partners to work with Crestron to kind of build that technology in that ecosystem?
We're all about collaboration. We know what we're good at. We don't try to go outside of our industry and ecosystem. Look, never going to say never. Dan Feldstein, the owner and CEO of the company, who knows what could happen in the future. What we do know is that we're focused on what we're good at. Our mantra is content. So that is all about entertainment everywhere, control. So Crestron Home, user interfaces. And the third one is collaboration. Collaboration for us is playing nicely with a huge ecosystem of partners. So we'll take the best in class wearables, the best in class other technologies from the smart home industry, and we'll work with them and we'll get more drivers, more collaboration, more partnerships. So for now, it would be more about who are we working with, who are we collaborating with to deliver incredible solutions in the home. So I don't want to say no because God, the world changes so quickly and never say never. But I know right now our focus is on what we're really good at. What we're focused on is making our integrators thrive and then partnering with as many companies as we can to make sure that the bits on the edges of the ecosystem can pull in and work seamlessly with Crestron.
So, okay, with all of this in mind, what advice would you then give to integrators, to Crestron dealers en masse who want to start, I guess, building out their understanding of wellness technologies and their offering and how they talk to customers? What advice would you give to them on how to actually approach this and kind of those first steps to take?
So I know that we have a lot of content, Crestron online. We've written blogs. We've created pitch decks. We have a wellness brochure. We have a few things that we've put together as base level understanding of how you could talk about Crestron. I know on the lighting side of things, on the lighting industry, many brands have research and data. There's companies like Delos in the US that focus on wellness tech and they have articles. I think, look, you can always reach out to myself. You can reach out to Crestron and we can have conversations. But there's also independent education and learning and research that I would advise dealers to go and do. It's not simple. It's not one size fits all. It is something that you would need to go and do some research on. But once you do that sort of high level understanding of the technology categories that could work, you can have this conversation quite naturally. So I do think you need to do some research. You need to go and get a better understanding. It's a hot trend. So start having a little bit of education, and you very quickly understand that you're doing it already. You're just not talking about it in this way. You're delivering shades, you're delivering lights, you're delivering audio, you're delivering climate. Just learning how you can pitch those on a wellness side. You could go in and have a stunning conversation with a customer and open their eyes.
It's interesting because you're right. It is absolutely a trend. And I think it's a global trend. And it's not simple. But at the same time, based on everything you've said on the podcast here and just in general, this isn't a passing fad. And I think that's important because we see a lot of kind of these issues come up and then disappear very quickly. But the fact that we've already been doing this for such a long time, we just haven't called wellness, it does show that this is here to stay.
Totally agree. It is. It is.
I think what struck me most about this conversation with Michael is just how much of the wellness conversation integrators are already part of, whether they know it or not. When you install a tunable lighting system that helps someone sleep better, or automate the temperature in a bedroom to match a person's preference, or design a media room that delivers calming soundscapes, you're not just delivering convenience. You're shaping mood, supporting recovery, enabling focus, and in some cases, empowering independence. The takeaway is that it's time we stopped treating wellness as a niche upsell and started embracing it as a core outcome of integration. As always, if you've got thoughts on this episode or you want to share how you're navigating the wellness conversation with clients, you can reach me via email at info@masterintegrator.com.au or connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening to Master Integrator. I'm Paul Skelton. I'll see you next time.